Herkese hoş geldiniz. Etkinliğin şimdi en beklenen noktası Masterclass'ımız. Değerli konuklarımız İsa Bal ve Ronan Sayburn. Dün yaptıkları seçki sonucunda beğendikleri şarapları sunacaklar ama bu beğendikleri şaraplar aslında sayıca istediklerinden daha az burada size sunabildik. Çünkü zaman kısıtımız var. Dolayısıyla şöyle de bir sistem izledik. Biliyorsunuz yukarıda 179 tane şarabımız var. Bu 179 şarabın hepsini tatmadılar. Tadamazlardı. Öyle bir zaman yoktu çünkü. Üreticilerden şöyle bir ricamız oldu. Dedik ki zaten en başta minimum 2 şarap, maksimum 10 şarap her bir üretici ve ithalatçı katılımda bulunabildi. Öyle de bir kısıt koyduk. Bütün ürünleri koyma imkanları yoktu. Ve bu ürünlerin içinden 2'şer şarabınızı Masterclass için aday gösterin lütfen dedik. Onlar da diyelim 8 şarabıyla katılan bir üretici ya da ithalatçı, o 8 şarabın içinden 2 şarabı aday gösterdi. Ve o 2 şaraplar toplamda yanlış hatırlamıyorsam 78 şarap yaptı. Ve dün İsa ve Ronan saat 10'da başladılar. Aşağı yukarı 3'e kadar süren yoğun bir mesaiden sonra çok titiz bir çalışmayla İlk önce 2 tane kendileri beğendikleri şarapları 10'ar 15'er tane şarap seçtiler. Sonra birbirleriyle tartışarak o adedi benim biraz da zorumla 13'e düşürdüler. Yoksa onlara kalsa 20 şarap falan belki çıkardı. Çok da enteresan bir selection oldu. Umarım beğeneceksiniz ve şimdi onların ağzından zaten neden seçtiler anlatacaklar. Hepimiz dinliyoruz. Teşekkürler.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Did you enjoy your tasting this morning? Yeah. Good. That sounds very enthusiastic. You've obviously tasted quite a lot. That's a good sign. Okay, it's my 3rd time back in Turkey. It's always a pleasure to come. Thank you very much for your hospitality. I'm always very well received, and you people are always very, very kind to me, so thank you very much for that. I think we need to say a big thank you to Tanner for organising this kind of event as well, because these things take an awful lot of organisation. I think he's done a great job with that, so well done, Tanner. Thank you very much. I think you should all buy a caravan on the way out. That would make him very happy. So, myself and Isa, we went through 80 different wines yesterday morning, and we picked out our selection here, which is the 13 wines. We did them all blind. The only thing we knew about them was the vintage and the grape variety. So we didn't know what region they came from. We didn't know the price point, anything like that. So they were really just chosen entirely on quality. And for me, this is a really eye-opening experience because a lot of these grape varieties I'm not that familiar with. So it was really just done on a total quality basis. Everybody seemed to enjoy the wines yesterday, so we hope you enjoy the wines today.
I think yesterday I briefly touched this as well. Going back 10, 15 years ago, if you had 80 wines on a tasting, let's say you had 20 whites in that 80. Of that 20 whites, probably 10 to 15 would have been oxidized and you could possibly not drink them. And reds, the tannins would have been managed so badly that after the second red, your jaws would probably lock, that you would struggle to taste anymore. So overall, I think the way the winemaking and understanding of the wine has changed so much in the industry here that out of 80 wines, like Tanner mentioned, we could have easily selected 20, 25 wines, and they would have been on par with these. So it was kind of a difficult decision to make as to what wine to put here. Some of these wines we put here because of their originality, and there were 1 or 2 surprises for us as well that we have not thought. There is a couple of producers, for example, we haven't heard of before. So it was for us an interesting selection process as well. So we have selected them, and I do hope that you are going to enjoy tasting them with us. And I do encourage you, if you have any question on the way, please just lift your head up or lift your hand up. There is a mobile microphone where we can bring it to you and you can ask your question if you have any question, or indeed comment. that you would like to make, just feel free to do that. So I think we should, without much delay, we should start with the first wine, and then we'll be going through them fairly swiftly because of the time issues. But like I said, if you have any comments, just do make it known.
So I think most of the wines that we've selected are kind of indigenous Turkish varieties, which I think is really good. I mean, there's enough Chardonnay and enough Cabernet Sauvignon out in the world. You don't really need to make more of it. I think, you know, if you have really good indigenous varieties, I think initially it makes it very tough for you guys because a lot of consumers won't be familiar with it. The names are hard to pronounce. They're going to be a little bit apprehensive before they buy the wines. So initially getting into a market is going to be tough. But once you do get into the market, you have something really unique and original, which is Turkish. And, you know, when you're making those wines, you're really kind of, you're maintaining your heritage, and that's really important. And if I'm allowed to mention the Greek wine industry, can I say that without getting in trouble? Okay. The Greek wine industry has done a really good job on promoting its native grape varieties. And things like Assyrtiko at the moment, if you go to any wine bar in New York, they're selling Assyrtiko by the glass. So they've done a really good job introducing that wine to foreign markets, and people have really picked up on it. So like I say, the world's got a lot of Cabernet, a lot of Chardonnay, a lot of Sauvignon Blanc, so really kind of, I've really enjoyed the indigenous varieties that I've tried in Turkey, and I think that that's a really good way to go. And saying that, we start with the first wine, the Emir. So we kind of picked this wine because it's it's a very simple wine. It's not kind of it's not kind of got lots of winemaking influence on it. It seems like it's not been in any new oak, and it's not really been through a lot of malolactic. So it's a very pure, very clean wine. Kind of in the style of something maybe like an Albarino or something like that. So I really like this wine just because I thought it was, no oak to it, very, very pure, very, very fresh, very clean, very minerally. It has a lovely kind of almost a saline finish to it, a bit like crushed oyster shells or something along those lines. So a kind of a great wine that would be really good, high acid wine like that would be really good with seafood, shellfish, anything along those lines. Great with a plate of fresh oysters, I think.
I think in terms of having a light wine to begin your lunch or dinner as well, it's just as an aperitif, or like Ronan says, with something light and fresh, this wine would be a very good match to enjoy with it as well. The important thing as well, the grape variety, Emir, is an important variety for this country, but sadly, it has been neglected for far too many years, and it has got a great potential. It is, in my opinion, along with several other varieties, it has got where strength of this country, at least in the export markets, if that was ever to happen, it will happen with this kind of grape varieties. Because let's face it, the competition this country's wine is going to face from other countries with the Cabernet, with the Chardonnay, Shiraz, etc., it will be far more stiffer than something like this. This is unique to it. You won't get it from anywhere else. So it's a perfect wine for export markets as well. And that said, Chardonnays, Cabernets, I think they have got their place certainly in this country. And I think there are some very good wines made from those varieties as well. So.
But I think it shows the quality of a grape variety when it can just be 100% one variety. It doesn't have any oak. It doesn't have any fancy winemaking techniques. It's just the pure flavor of the grape, and it comes out tasting like that. It's a really fresh, really mouth-watering, you know, just a really nice glass of wine, I think. Any comments on the Emir? Hands up, do we like it? Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice wine. Yeah, it's very good. Yeah. So moving on to the second wine. Yeah. So,
go on.
So I think this was I'd have to say, I think this is my favorite wine of the whole flight, the second wine, the Narinje. So the first time I've ever tried this variety. So again, yeah, a real revelation for me. I I think it's a very interesting wine. It kind of falls into the category of wines that are quite high terpene wines that have those floral, muscaty kind of characters. So a bit like Viogniers, a bit like Muscat. It reminds me a lot of Torrentes, so a bit like a Gewürztraminer kind of orangey characteristic. And I really feel when I taste this wine, it's almost like eating something like a ripe tangerine. So it's got that sweet kind of rounded fruit to it, but then it has that really nice, strong acidity at the back of the palate. So it really balances it off. I think it's just a lovely, complex, aromatic style of wine to it.
Narinja, I think, is quite an important variety as well for the wine industry here. But also, speaking of the heritage, it is a heritage of us, and it is something that I think we need to owe to the rest of the world, that we need to preserve and make wines that are top quality from these varieties. This Narinja, or Narinja in general in this country, in the last few years has been suffering, because I don't know how many of you are aware, a lot of the people who grow Narinja, they can get more money from the leaves of that grape than the grapes themselves. So stop eating stuffed wine leaves. Save Narinja. No, it's a very well made wine. With the aromatic structure of it is very interesting actually, because sometimes it can be quite subtle, sometimes it's difficult to ascertain the aromatic complexity of it. Whereas on this you do have very pronounced orange blossom, that sort of aromatic profile, and then you have got some exotic fruits, floral notes, really sort of well balanced, and just balance, I think, is the key word here, isn't it?
Yeah. And just, some unique flavors. Again, this is really what the wine world wants. It wants a different grape variety that tastes in a different way and brings you something unique. I think that really this grape variety could be your Assyrtiko. I think that you could really do some fantastic business with this grape variety abroad. I think it's just really fantastic. And the interesting thing about this wine is that it was only 2 barriques made, so only 600 bottles. So 600 bottles of this wine made. So
I think we drank up for production here.
yeah.
So, then, if no one has anything to add on the second white wine we have done, we are going to move on to our third wine. The third wine, this time the region and the grape variety changes. It's a Chardonnay from Thrace, and it's by Çamlıca Chardonnay. I think one of the reasons this wine came through amongst the... Çalışıyor muyuz? Tamam.
Okay.
One of the reasons this wine came through amongst the others. One of the wines this wine came through amongst the other was that the management of oak is really well made here. There is this reductiveness where it actually adds complexity to the wine, that sort of flinty, smoky structure it has got. And then I must also say that there is a really good vineyard husbandry behind this wine. The vineyards are managed very meticulously, and they are not necessarily grown on the easiest place to grow wine. They are open to frost, they are open to other climatic dangers, really marginal climate where things can go really wrong by just fate, by just the way the weather pattern changes. So there is a lot of risk taken to make the wine, and the result on this one is really good. You could, in our discussions, my point was you could put this wine amongst many great Chardonnays from around the world, including Burgundy and others. This would stand on its own. This would stand its ground. So I think very well made wine, and I hope you will enjoy it as well.
Yeah, Chardonnay for me is really it's a very neutral grape variety. I always think of Chardonnay a bit like chicken. It's like the chicken of the wine world. You can kind of do what you want to it, really. You can put it with a green sauce, you can put it with herbs, you can grill it, you can fry it, you can mince it, you can deep fry it, you can roast it, you can barbecue it, you can put it with all sorts of cream sauces or cheese sauces. You kind of really do whatever you want to it. It's really like a blank canvas. And Chardonnay is a bit like that as well, as in the winemaker can decide if he wants to leave it on its lees, give it a lot of batonnage, give it a lot of lee stirring. He can decide whether he wants to put it through malolactic fermentation, soften all the acidity out, make it very creamy. He can decide if he wants to put it into brand new oak, give it that vanilla characteristic. So you can do a lot of different things with Chardonnay, and there's an awful lot of very bad Chardonnay in the world that's made with oak chips and over malolactic fermentation to it, and making really cloying, very heavy, very unpleasant Chardonnay. And the way the world's going with Chardonnay is a lot more of this typical style. So a little bit of malolactic, a little bit of oak aging. I always think of oak aging, and without this sounding too sexist, it's kind of makeup on a pretty woman. If you put too much makeup on, she doesn't look very pretty anymore. So just a little bit of makeup and she looks fantastic. And that's really what oak should be like. It should be just a tiny, tiny amount that enhances the wine and doesn't dominate it. And I think with this wine, you get that slight kind of creme brulee vanilla character that comes from the oak. But again, the oak aging is not too heavy. The malolactic's not gone too far. And it's made in a slightly reductive style, which means that they're making it in a pretty low oxygen environment. And that's giving you that flavor or that smell a bit like struck match or slightly sulfurous, slightly reductive characteristic. And it's the sort of classic way that they make Burgundy. And all over California and Sonoma and Australia, they're starting to make Chardonnays like this. So this is a really world-class Chardonnay that I think would stand up against some of the best in the world, kind of as Issa said.
Yeah, and also we need to...
Use the microphone.
When I taste this wine, I always think about food. Maybe that tells something about me. And what would we eat with this Chardonnay? I always think just plain grilled sea bream or sea bass or something like that with a light salad. This Chardonnay will be just an amazing wine. Okay, let's move on to my favorite wine. Well, I'm just being sarcastic there, by the way. It's a Chenin Blanc. Chenin Blanc and I are not always the best of buddies. But we selected it because stylistically it's very different from anything else we have got here. If you tasted it, you will probably have noticed that it has got some sweetness to it. So the fermentation has not gone all the way until dryness. They have left some sugar level. What would you say, maybe 30, 40 grams?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, something along that. So it has got some sweetness. And this is one of the typical styles of Chenin Blanc from Loire Valley in France. Chenin is quite a versatile grape variety where sparkling still wines are made from it. Dry, medium dry, very sweet wines are made from it. So it's a very versatile grape, generally defined as having this bruised apple-like character to it as well. Tends to have high acidity, so that's why it's always good to have it with high-fat food. It does tend to work very well.
Yeah, but it's interesting, out of all the 80 wines that we tried, I think there was 10 non-Turkish wines in there. And like we say, we didn't know which were Turkish and not Turkish. We only knew the grape variety and vintage. So out of all 80, we only picked one wine that was non-Turkish in the whole lineup, which I think is a good sign of the quality that's being made here now. But yeah, we picked this Vouvray. I mean, I kind of like it because I quite like the residual sugar in it. I think if you've got a little bit of residual sugar, but you've got very, very high acidity, then they balance each other out. I don't think this wine stays too sweet or too cloying in the mouth. The acid really cleanses the back of the palate and just makes the wine really refreshing. So, like Issa said, you get a lot of that sort of oxidized apple, bruised apple characteristics with Chenin Blanc. I think that the residual sugar often works very, very well with things like chili. So if you have a wine that's quite hot and has quite a lot of chili into it, the residual sugar will act against that, and it will help tone down that heat from the chili. I think with things like pork and apple, those sort of dishes, I think they'd work really, really nicely with that as well. So,
and there seems to be a sort of a fashion on Chenin Blanc in certain quarters of the wine world.
Yeah.
Some people are really Chenin fanatics, and yeah, I'm not.
Do people like the residual sugar? Do they dislike it? What do you think? Hands up if you like the sugar. Yeah, I think I think sugar is not bad if it's balanced. I mean, who likes German Riesling? If you like wine, you love German Riesling. And that's the same thing, very, very high acid, a little bit of sugar, but perfectly in balance. Yeah. And I think this is a good example of that.
So if anyone has any comment or question on the white wines, please do ask. Otherwise, we are going to move on to our red wines.
I think it's good when you have so many of you in the room. If you have questions, then probably a lot of you have the same question. And I think it's good to have a bit of a debate. And you know, you're all kind of Turkish. You're all enthusiasts of Turkish wine. So now's the time to either tell your fellow enthusiasts what you like about Turkish wine and what you don't like, or where you think you could be going, or whatever. So it's just a nice time for you to be able to talk about these things while you're all together. Yes, you have a question at the back.
Hi, yeah. I have a comment to make. I found the whites actually, in general, more successful than the reds. This time, it was the only time that I found this out actually.
Okay.
And it was amazing how the quality of the whites actually improved over the years, as Isabel said actually.
Yeah.
I mean, like you could have found a lot of oxidized whites in the marketplace just 5-6 years ago, but it has improved drastically in the past 5 years, 6 years. And my favorite is in these whites is Vinolus, for example.
Yes.
It's very characteristic, very I mean unique in what the flavor and what you have in the nose and in the palate and everything. But my only concern is they're discontinuing the brand. Okay. And what happens if we find it? I mean, if we love it and actually really rate it the highest, and then we can find the wine in the marketplace.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of a problem that the wine industry in Turkey is going through, and it will go through. And exports is kind of interesting. I mean, and you have a lot of important role in that. I mean, improving the market, the brand image of Turkish wines abroad, and I hope you do that in the future.
I think it's very important for the Turkish wine industry to have a very clear message when they're approaching a foreign market. So you've got to have very smart marketing. You've got to make things as clear as possible to a foreign market who aren't used to these grape varieties or used to these names. So you've got to have nice maps, nice material. You've got to organize events and you know, go out to the world and go out as Team Turkey. You know, you really got to come together. It's a big world, and there's lots of people making wine out there. So if you were trying to approach this thing as individual wineries, you're never going to get very far. So you've got to do it as a team effort. So, you know, someone to take control over something like a Wines of Turkey marketing initiative, and to be able to bring that sort of stuff. You know, Issa came to the place that I work in London and did a fantastic Turkish day, more or less. And it was sold out, wasn't it? I mean,
yes, we had nearly 300 people visit in one day.
Yeah.
So it was very good.
One of the producers had told Issa that he ran out of wine, and he'd never done that before. So I think it was a very well-organized day. I think Tanner and Issa organized it, and it was a very clear thing what they wanted to do, and the consumers came and really enjoyed it. And I think that's the way you got to go forward. You got to go forward as a team effort and approach the world from that respect. So, and you know, talking about varieties like the Narinje, I mean, back in the 1960s, Viognier was so low in production, it was down to about 6 hectares in the Rhone Valley, and it nearly disappeared altogether. But some producers still believed in the grape variety, carried on planting it, carried on making it into the wine, and now we all know Viognier, it's all over the world, and you know, Condrieu is some of the most fantastic white wine in the world. So, yeah, you've got to believe in these grape varieties and keep at them.
Okay, now we move on to reds, and the first red we are going to be tasting on this lineup is a Kalecik Karası, one of the varieties from around Ankara. And it's actually produced probably by one of the most prominent wineries for this grape variety, Kavaklıdere 2011. It's interesting in the way that when people think about wine in Turkey, first of all, people have an image, Turkey being desert, semi-desert, or very hot climate country. But that could not be further from the truth, simply because Turkey has so much variety in terms of climatic condition, weather conditions, altitude, etc. You do get wines that are quite actually light in body sometimes. Not saying this is a light wine, but Kalecik Karas as a variety, it is difficult one to grow simply because the sugar levels can go up quite easy. So if you are not careful, you will have the sugar ripeness, but the phenolic ripeness, tannins, etc., will not be there. So it's a tricky one, but certainly it's one of the varieties I think Turkey can do a lot with.
Yeah, I mean, it has a lot of characteristics like Pinot Noir. It's quite light in color, has a nice bright acidity. It's a very pure flavor to it. I think there's a little bit of oak in there, but not too much. I think that hopefully when you've tasted all these wines, you'll see that we've not really gone for anything which is too heavy in oak. I think the world as well is moving away from heavily oaked wines, and I think as winemakers, you should be very pleased about that, because oak is very expensive. And often people think the route to making great wine is to buy the most expensive barrels that you can and throw your wine in it for as long as you can. And what that does is, especially if it's a heavy tannic variety, and it gives you a lot of tannin from the grape, and it gives you tannin from the barrels, and you end up with something which is just so hard, it's never going to, the tannin's never going to soften until the fruit's disappeared altogether. So I think a good thing for winemakers is just cutting down on the amount of oak that's in the wine. So hopefully you'll see that theme throughout the wines that we've picked. Sort of low amounts of oak, really. But no, I think this is a really unique variety.
I think so.
Offers some different unique flavors, which some sort of sagey, herbal characteristics to the wine. So yeah, so really interesting.
If we move on to next variety, which is from a winery near Edirne. Edirne is the name of the winery. Papas Karas is the grape variety. I think on yesterday's tasting, I have talked about a book that I read on wine tasting. And this book still remains the best book I read on tasting or how to taste wine. It was written by Len Evans, an Australian, or he was Welsh, then became Australian. And he wrote just one book, and the book was basically 42 pages after a lifetime spent in wine on how to taste wine. On that, he said, when he was talking about wine, he said, no wood, no good. So if there is no oak aging, the wine is not good. That's the only part I disagreed with him. And I say this story simply because the following wine we are tasting has actually not seen any oak. So there is no oak aging in the wine. It's just pure fruit and the wine making. So that's what you are tasting, just the grape variety itself without any effect of wood or any other flavors that may pick up from anything else. Quite bright fruit, red fruit, soft tannins, very easy to drink. And I think it's a very, very well made wine in the fashion that you can drink one bottle, but the second bottle will probably taste better.
We'll try that later. But yeah, just to say, we do have 3 more reds coming. So if you could empty your first 3 white wines, and the guys will fill you up with the reds. But no, I think that this is a really interesting grape variety as well. There's been a big resurgence in this style of wine recently. So places like Beaujolais are really enjoying the benefits from it. A few years ago, you could buy Beaujolais very, very cheap, and now Beaujolais is getting very expensive because it's such a popular style. It tends to be light in color, has lots of that cherry red, raspberry fruit to it, very sort of cranberry, tart tannins, and a crisp acidity. So those very kind of pure, very, very unadorned wines, again, in red, are becoming very popular. They're making great Sanso down in South Africa now, which is very much in this style. So again, I think it's just another really unique variety that's bringing a flavor to the world really wants to try.
And this is a variety, actually. It is a variety that is not just grown in Turkey. You can find this variety in Bulgaria. Interestingly, they have a Turkish name for it in Bulgaria. We have the Greek name in Turkey, and you can find some in Greece as well. So it reflects the geography very well. It reflects the story or history of the geography, what happened, how people moved, and things like that. You can actually see that if you think about what happened. Shall we move on to next?
Yeah. So any comments about those last two wines? Do you like them? I mean, the last time I came to Turkey, I went to Thrace, and I had some very, very heavy red wines with a lot of oak in it, and I was told that's the style that people like. So is it the style you like, or do you like a lighter style? Do you like both? Are the people's tastes changing? What do you think of that last wine? Did you like that? Hands up if you thought that was a good wine. Yeah? Okay, good. Great.
The next one, we have got something from Sula Winery, Karasakız. This particular wine showed itself in a way that probably this had more volatile acidity than the others, but at a level that it had complexity to the wine rather than deter from the quality of it. It's quite light. On the nose, it's quite herbal, like almost like dry thyme, sage, that kind of flavor profile, but very floral as well. Quite a distinct, almost violet-like, dry violet-like floral notes, potpourri notes to it. Light with refreshing acidity, very characterful and interesting style of wine.
So really just like good Pinot Noir. It has that kind of earthy characteristic to it and that really nice bright cherry fruit to it. But again, not a heavy wine. I don't think any of these wines are particularly high in alcohol, so they just show an awful lot of balance, I think, to the wines, which is the nice thing. And that mouth-watering acidity, I think, which is really good. Out of those last three wines, what are people's favorites? Are there any particular ones that you like more than others? That was the sort of the lightest style. We move on to some heavier wines now, but...
So let's have a show of hands. For people who prefer Kalecik Karası as their favorite, hands up. Okay, thank you. And then Papaz Karası, who preferred Papaz Karası. So give or take the same number. And Karasakız.
I think I like that one.
It's again, I think there is pretty much similar number of people preferring the same wine. That means it's talking to different people. That's exactly what it is. When we taste these wines, it may appeal to some people, it may not appeal to some others. You will like some of them, you won't like some of them, but that's what wine is. If we all like the same thing, wine would be like beer. Or beer is the wrong word. You can get so many different beers nowadays. It would be like Coke. So you would be like drinking Coke. Ice and lemon, that's it. That's the only variety you are going to get. So the wine, it reflects the geography, it reflects the grape variety, it reflects the hand that made it. That's why you are going to get so many different styles, so many different aromas and flavors. The important thing is, I think, to be open-minded, give it a try. If you don't like it, you move on, you find something that you will like. There is enough for somebody will find something. There is enough variety there. Please.
Thank you very much. My question is, I saw very interesting Kalecik Karası wines upstairs. Okay, Kavaklıdere is the first winemaker, I think, who made this Kalecik Karası. But I saw much more interesting Kalecik Karası wines. This one has a bitterness for me. I just was very curious why you selected this one
I think
specifically.
in terms of bitterness, I haven't picked up the bitterness from it. And bitterness is an interesting thing because the level people pick up bitterness changes quite a lot from one person to another one. People who generally are with a very sensitive palate, they tend to pick up bitterness more. So that is you, that is your physiology that picks that up. And I haven't picked it up. I am sort of usually quite sensitive to bitterness, but you clearly are more sensitive than I am Yeah.
A flavour a bit like licorice, like a sweet licorice on the back of the palate, and maybe licorice is slightly bitter, but I think that's it's in balance. Don't think it's for me. I just really enjoyed that wine, and out the ones that we tried, I think
Yeah.
it was yeah.
I think what we liked was, again, the use of oak was not sort of muddling the wine down. It was allowing the grape variety to show itself. That's probably why we chose it mainly, the balance of the things.
To be honest, I saw local winemakers, small winemakers, which had also kaleci karası, but the taste was, for me,
But also,
more
But
interesting.
also, you need to think about it. We might have not even tasted some of those wines.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we had 80 wines to try, so.
So there is a possibility of that too. So we might have not tasted that. It depends if that one might in front of us.
But if
or
there's
not.
better ones out there, then that's even better, because I think that was great. And if there's ones better than that, then fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so we move on to the slightly heavier wines now. The first wine is a Marcelin. So this is actually a French variety. It's actually a crossing. It's a crossing of Grenache and Cabernet Sauvignon that they did down in sort of near Toulouse, down in the sort of Languedoc area of France, back in the 1960s. So I was surprised to see that being grown in Turkey. But I think it's a nice wine. I think it's got some really bright, really interesting, ripe fruit to it. Very much sort of on the black plum skin and kind of floral violet sort of characteristic to it. I think it's got a really charming, pretty, forward aromatic nose to it. And then on the palate, sort of juicy, structured, solid tannins, and really nice fruit to it again. So, yeah, it's a nice wine.
I think there might be one or two others in the country, so there aren't that many of it. This has the depth of flavor, and you can clearly see in terms of structure we are going a level up. It's heavier, it's fuller bodied wine. So you will find that this will appeal to some people, and some people will find it too heavy. But again, that's what the wine is. It has got slight vegetal notes on the nose as well, and some floral notes, very ripe, dark fruit to it as well. Quite a good wine.
Okay, so moving on. So the next wine is really the only indigenous Turkish variety that I was aware of that we kind of know quite well in London, which is Okuzgozu. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. And I think, yeah, for kind of what's probably your flagship grape variety of reds in Turkey, I think it's a really nice wine. I think it's a wine that blends quite well. And this, we had a couple of people ask questions about this particular one that we chose yesterday, and I don't know. I would imagine if it's such a widely planted variety that people are making it in different ways. Some people are making a lighter style, some people are making a heavier style, but this was the one that we particularly liked.
Yeah. I think yesterday I mentioned as well, when it comes to Öküzgözü, in my experience with Öküzgözü is that it's a bit like supporting a football team. You support a football team, and that's your football team. And you smoke a cigarette, you smoke certain brand of cigarette. You prefer that cigarette. You drink raki, you prefer a certain brand of raki. And to a drinker of certain brand of raki, it's very hard to get them drink something else. With the Öküzgözü, my experience is pretty much the same. People prefer a certain style of Öküzgözü, but the others, they often object to the style. And with this, we tasted this wine, and we found the fruit, tannin, acidity in check, in good balance. It's stylistically, it's quite rich, full-bodied. So those of you who prefer more of the traditional style may say, this is not Öküzgözü. But it's just another face of it. And this is the face we decided to show you today.
So any comments on those last two reds? Did you like the Marcelin? It's a lovely, yeah, very charming aromatic style, I think. It's good. And the Okuzgozu, you like that? Are you used to a heavier style? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay.
If we are all done with Öküzgözü, we are going to move on to another variety, Acıkara. Can I just see who has tasted this variety before? So there are good few number of people who have actually tried this wine, and I think their first vintage, if I remember, was correctly 2012. So it's a relatively new variety, and it was a variety that was found high up in Taurus Mountain around Elmalı and saved from basically oblivion. And they are now making this wine. It's quite deep colored wine, very rich, full bodied, but my experience always tells me that this variety you need to keep. If you buy the new vintage and try to drink it, it's gonna be tough. It's got quite a structure, it's got quite tannic structure, acidity, everything is there, but it needs a little bit of time to show its best, few years maybe. This will go a few more years and develop. I like the authentic, unique character of the wine. It sometimes, in some respect, reminds me of some of the Barolos, sometimes hint of Bierzo-like characteristics coming through. It's definitely a unique profile.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely never tasted this grape variety before, but I think it's, and what we've tried to find in most of these wines is just really good balance. So not too high in alcohol, nice acidity, good structure, good fruit profile, and I think, you know, all of these sort of indigenous Turkish grape varieties are showing really nice balance to them. So, yeah, and especially this one, quite a unique variety.
You can see actually the tannins are really there, but they are not dry tannins. They are ripe, but they are powerful, strong tannins. That reminds me sort of some Italian wines in style. The acidity is quite high. That refreshes the palate. You really need food with this wine. If you drink it on its own, it's gonna be quite a tiring experience. But if you have it with a nice piece of meat, I think you are into a treat. Our last three wines here, we now move away from the Turkish varietals and they are from international varieties. I think you should start with the next one, Ronan.
Okay, so the next one is the Barbare Grenache Syrah Mourvèdre blend. So Grenache Syrah and Mourvèdre is the traditional blend that you use down in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And that's really because Grenache is a high alcohol variety. It tends to be quite low in acidity, tends to be quite low in tannin, it tends to be high in alcohol, and it tends to be quite jammy. So drinking Grenache from a warm climate area like the Southern Rhone is not very pleasant. There's only one famous producer down there, which is Château Rayas, that makes 100% pure Grenache, and that's because they make it in very, very cool, sandy soils. But most people make Châteauneuf-du-Pape in very rocky soil the varieties get a lot of heat and the alcohol level goes right up. So they blend in a bit of Syrah and they blend in a bit of Syrah because Syrah tends to be lower in alcohol than Grenache. It tends to have a stronger tannic structure. It tends to have a fresher acidity to it. So basically blending Grenache and Syrah just brings down the amount of alcohol, it brings up the tannin, it brings up the acidity, and just gives the wine generally a lot more. Do we have any questions at the back here? There's a lady at the side have a question? Madam, do you have something to say? Would you like to say anything? Do you have any questions? No? Okay, all right, okay. So this is the traditional kind of Châteauneuf-du-Pape blend. And then they add a little bit of Mourvèdre in, basically just to give it a kind of a rustic kind of characteristic. So I believe that this winemaker is French?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Okay.
So as far as the Châteauneuf is concerned, we keep talking Châteauneuf, obviously it's not Châteauneuf, but on the tasting, I thought it was Châteauneuf. So it was actually in that style, it's very well made. So if anyone is doing Châteauneuf-du-Pape tasting, here is an idea. You stick this wine in and compare them. And I think it's very well made. and it shows all the characteristics, all the hallmark of that variety or that style of wine.
But I think it's a good example of, why you blend grapes together, because sometimes you do see the most crazy blends. We saw one blend, and excuse me if the winemaker is here, but we saw a blend of Syrah, Cabernet, Merlot, and Pinot Noir in one of the wines. We kind of think, why would somebody do that unless you're trying to make a Bordeaux, Rhone Valley, Burgundy? So when you're kind of blending these grape varieties, they need to be blended for a reason. You need to blend them to either bring, to support another variety or to give an extra depth of flavor to them, but there must be some kind of logic behind the blending. And I think Châteauneuf-du-Pape is just a classic blend, and all the grapes are there for a certain reason, and they bring something to the overall product.
So the next wine is from around Bodrum, and Shiraz or Syrah is the grape variety. And I think as far as Shiraz and Syrah is concerned in Turkey, there are quite a few wines that are made very well. You can name maybe 10, 15 Syrah or Shiraz-based wine in Turkey, and I think they would have been all made excellent. What we liked about this wine, there was very good fruit definition, like blackberries, wild berry flavor, as well as that spiciness that Shiraz has. And tannin structure was very well made, and acidity is quite refreshing as well. It's very young wine, and I think it has got good potential to be aged for a while, but it's also already approachable and very pleasant to drink.
Yeah, and I think something, another point to make about making varieties like Cabernet or Syrah or Chardonnay. Obviously, everyone's going to have the benchmark is going to be the Rhone Valley or Burgundy or Bordeaux. So if you do make a Syrah, they're going to immediately compare it to the Rhone Valley. If you make a Narinje, they're not going to have anything to compare it to, so it stands on its own merits, which might be a good thing, might be a bad thing. But I think that this wine, if it was up with a lineup of Northern Rhone wines, I think it would show really favorably. It has a lot of those characteristics you get in the Northern Rhone. It has that lovely violet-y kind of deep color to it. It has that purple flower character on the nose, nice acidity, good tannins. The alcohol's not too high. And again, a sort of a slightly meaty, sanguine, kind of bloody characteristic to it. So, but very classic Syrah.
Definitely. I think it reflects all the characters, all the hallmarks of the grape variety, and the ripeness, the balance, everything fell in place nicely, and I hope they can repeat this. Now we are on to our last wine, and with this wine, or with this style of wine in Turkey, there are quite a lot of it made. And you have got some of them sometimes suffers from over-extraction or aging too long or in an oak that is not entirely the best quality. And on this particular one, what we found and liked is that fruit was not killed off by aging in wood. There is obviously oak aging in that. But also there was a good definition of fruit, ripeness of the tannin. And again, all of these wines, I looked at it from the point that is everything imbalanced. I think that's the main quality of a wine. If everything is imbalanced, you already have something good in it. And then you need to look further to see further qualities in it.
Yeah, and I think that this for me was the wine that really had the right amount of oak, just a gentle amount of oak to it, and was just really well seamlessly integrated into the red fruit. And again, another blend, an unusual blend of Cabernet, Syrah, and Merlot, but with just the right amount of oak to it, I think. So yeah, very elegant, very refined wine, I think.
Can I just ask to people, in terms of the whites, 1 to 4, can people tell me their favorite? If you say 1, number 1, who would take number 1 home if you were taking a bottle home today amongst the whites? Yes. And the second, number 2, it's a bit more. Number 3, and number 4, give or take, yeah. It seems like the whites are evenly sort of spread. I reckon the reds will probably split people a bit more. There is a lot more different variation, and there's a lot more wine in there. So maybe we could do the last 3 wines. If you are taking one of the last 3 wines, which one would you take home? First, second, third. Okay, let's start with the last one. Who would take last one home? So it's quite popular. The second one from last? They are all popular. You keep lifting up the arm for every wine. you are gonna take a whole case home. And how about the Grenache Shiraz Mourvèdre blend from Barbare? Okay, that's got few hands up as well. Of the other varieties, if we say Kalecik Karası, Karasakız, and Papas Karası, who takes what home? Kalecik Karası, who is taking Kalecik Karası home? Kalecik Karası, Papas Karası, who is taking that one home? And the Karasakız? So Karasakız seems to be doing the best here. And then the other 3, the Öküz Gözü, Marselan, and Acı Kara. Öküz Gözü, who takes home? Okay, there is none left, sorry. And the Marselan, that's good. And the Acı Kara. Okay. Well, thank you. And Acı Kara, I think if you want to take it home, you might just want to rush, because there's a lot of people who wants to take it home. And any questions from anyone? Go for it.
Do I need a microphone?
Might be better.
Thank you. So my question is a little bit of generic about the winemaking techniques in Turkey or the style. So regardless of each brand we tasted today, where do you see Turkish wine market amongst the other countries? Like, for example, giving the location or the history, is it closer to the old world, or given the acceleration of wine techniques or wine style it has in Turkey last 10 years, is it closer to new world, or can we say, is it the new world amongst old world countries?
Well, I'd probably say it was more old world in style, as in, it has more present earthy characteristics and tannic characteristics to it. But I think there's always a big emphasis on winemaking, and I think the emphasis nowadays in modern winemaking should really be in the vineyard. So it should be really good vineyard techniques. It should be, good canopy management. It should be shading the fruit or exposing the fruit where and when it needs. Should be getting really good balance by the amount of grapes and the amount of bunches on a vine. It should be cutting down on disease and rot, and really good sorting at the winery. So bringing in really, really healthy, good quality fruit. And then the winemaking really takes care of itself. I think what people enjoy nowadays are very pure, very bright flavors. So the winemaking, pretty much, it does itself. It's Mother Nature. It kind of works on its own. As long as you're maintaining the temperatures and things like that, good winemakers nowadays don't really mess around with it too much. They understand the vineyards, they understand the grapes, and they understand how to ferment them without too much hands-on interference. So I think that there should be less emphasis on the actual winemaker and more the person who's really caring for the fruit and spending time in the vineyards and bringing it in and giving it to. Any winemaker who has really, really good fruit can make good wine. But that's the hard thing, is growing the good fruit, I think.
Well, you can't make good wine with bad fruit, but you can do the opposite.
Yeah.
So it's more more related to the terroir than the winemaking techniques and.
I think
the
so, yeah,
winemaker,
yeah. But you can decide what your yield is going to be, whether you can decrease your yield, how you manage your vines, doing minimum amount of spraying, doing different techniques that you can use, things like pheromone confusion to control the insect levels, all of that sort of thing. So I think you can do that to get overall really good quality grapes. You can be very meticulous in your vineyard, going through and cutting out rot, very meticulous on your sorting tables, taking out any green berries or any rotten berries, and doing that sort of attention to detail. I think that's where the most successful wines in the world are made nowadays.
Definitely, and also I think a conventional winemaking, going back to your original question, is well understood now in Turkey to large extent. I think the next step, the natural step should be and would be, is going to be that people will start to experiment more in how they actually make the wine. And you need to experiment more. If you want to develop a new style, if you want to put in front of people something more original, you have to sort of change the ways a little bit. And I think one thing that is not happening at the moment in Turkey is natural winemaking. That is going to have to happen at some point and will happen, inevitably. So that will add another layer of complexity and variety to the wine world in Turkey. But overall, I think the understanding of winemaking techniques is much better than it used to be, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, at the back there. Yeah, it's the guy right at the back there. Oh.
İsa ve açıklamaların bir yerinde bir Türkçe kitaptan, bir kitaptan bahsettiniz şarapla ilgili. Onu tekrarlayabilir misiniz lütfen? Güzel bir şarap dediniz.
That book I mentioned, unfortunately, is not for sale anywhere. You can only buy it from the winery that guy used to own. Or they send it somewhere in Australia. If you have a friend there, ask them to buy it for you and they can send it to you. It's Len Evans, How to Taste Wine or Wine Tasting, something like that. Small book, 42 pages. You can read it in half an hour. And it will make you a brilliant taster.
Hi. My question is the world going into more aromatic wine or being more full-bodied?
I would probably say more. It's a mix of both, really. I think that like Isa was saying, the interesting thing about the world of wine is there's lots of different flavors, and if there's a lot of flavors available to people, then you can choose your own kind of style. So I think definitely aromatic whites, moving away from those oaky styles, and just different flavors than things like Cabernet, things like Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. So, aromatic varieties like Viognier, Gewürztraminer, Torrontés, Narinje, those sort of varieties I think are always going to be popular. And I think generally people are moving away from the heavier, more alcoholic styles of wine. I think people are looking for more elegance and more finesse in general in wine drinking. You can definitely see that in California. California are definitely 10 years ago in California, they would be doing wines at 15.5%. They'd be spending 24 months in 200% new oak. You would literally have to pour them out of a bottle like tomato sauce. And now they've really cut back on all of that and are going for much, much more elegant, more refined flavors. I think we've kind of moved a bit away from the Robert Parker scoring generation, and that's probably mean that people are less kind of scared to make wine that's not going to be scoring in the high 90s nowadays. So I think...
If I can add to that something, if I was producing wine, I much would prefer to make wine that are lighter, both in alcohol and structure, because look, at the end of the day, there aren't that many winemakers in the world who makes wine without thinking, how am I going to sell this wine? If you have a lighter wine, the chances are you will drink your second one. Whereas if you have a 15-16% alcohol wine, that almost feels like a soup. What is the chances of that wine being drunk by one person, one bottle on their own? Not very often. So I think financially it makes sense to make slightly lighter wines as well.
Okay.
And you spend less money on oak.
Yeah, and you don't need to do really heavy bottles as well. That's really silly.
But this is only business-wise. But really, wine-wise, what would you choose?
Wine-wise, I don't have a... I couldn't tell you I prefer this or that. I was talking to Ronan yesterday about a Zinfandel that I like. It's called the Jackass Zinfandel from California. It's got 17.5% alcohol. I like that. But on the other hand, I do love Burgundies as well, which tend to be quite lighter in style. So I like wine. I'm not really committed to taste just one style of wine. I taste all different styles of wine, and there are some full-bodied wines I really like. There are some very light wines I really like, and there are styles that I don't necessarily like. So it's I guess tasting wide variety and deciding which ones you like.
There was a very well-known English wine critic that was asked, what's your favourite type of wine? And he says, well, it's like having lots of children and being asked to choose which is your favourite. You kind of like them all at times, and you dislike them all at times.
I could just add that I think the world is going to aromatic world of wine, more than the body.
Okay.
Because I was in South Africa, I have witnessed that in Stellenbosch and many others.
Okay.
And I was in Taurasi, and sometimes people didn't like it because of the full body.
Okay.
And now it's going, and I think Turkey is also developing a lot. That's what I have noticed here, into very aromatic wine world.
Yeah.
So that's a good step for us.
Great. And like I say, I've been my third time in Turkey, and every time I come, the wines are just better and better. And this time they've been really good. So you're obviously moving in the right direction.
All right.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes. Oh.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Kay. I work for the Food Sleuth. What I wanted to ask was the second wine of the red area was full of the Shiraz, full of cloves, cinnamon. I loved it. What would you pair with it?
Venison with black peppercorns.
Yeah, we
something
don't
like
get
that.
venison here.
Oh, you don't get venison. Okay. Wild boar.
Okay,
Something like
pig
that.
is out.
Yeah. Okay.
What would you do? I mean, okay, venison is out, pork is out. What would you pair with this? I love it.
Well, I think full body, full meats, full red meats, something like that.
Beef?
Yeah, something like beef. Something with beef, maybe with something like beetroot. With
Okay,
with an
that's
earthy
good.
flavour like beetroot, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And I
Okay.
think matching food and wine sometimes it pays to ignore the main ingredient on the plate, i.e., you complement what's around the actual main ingredients. You can do that, and I would also think about the game. The wild game. Not
But
maybe.
access to wild game in Turkey
Well, I think
is
there is
not
plenty.
easy.
I think there is plenty in the right season in Turkey as well. So I would not certainly pair it with duck, but I would think about the others. And like Ronan said, some of the richer red meat dishes would work, but you need to think about what can I do with this food to make sure that it actually enhances the character
Well,
of the wine.
right, yes, because I do like the wine. So I'm thinking, what food could I produce that would enhance the wine?
I would say just do a simple ribeye steak, use plenty of black pepper on it, and have a nice sort of salad on the side. It would do a very good job if you want to
Okay.
do something simple.
Okay, great. And what about the Edirne wine? Because that's been a surprise for me in this tasting.
Yeah. That was a surprise for
Their
us as well.
Chardonnay has blown me away. Not just the quality, but also the price that they have. And you've featured one of their wines, the Papa Karasa, here. What's your opinion on this new vineyard that suddenly appeared that doesn't appear to be in shops in the country, yet is a pretty good wine?
It's not pretty good wine, it's a very good wine.
Right, yes.
And I think by putting it here, we kind of declared our opinion on it.
Right. Is there any way to promote it further so that people can go into the local supermarket
That would be
and find it?
up to the producer.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tam Can Bey biliyorum ben. Biraz yolu uzattım ama çok önemli.
Merhabalar Can.
Biz size soralım o zaman. 2 şişe götürmek isteseniz hem bireysel olarak hangi 2 şişeyi götürürdünüz?
It's definitely a question for you, that one.
Yeah. If I was taking two bottles out of these here, I would definitely take that Edrine Papas Karası and the Narince. Excuse me? No, I said Edrine Papas Karası and Narince. For me, those two, I would take them. But that's me. You might prefer something else, that's perfectly fine too. But then if I'm choosing for myself, then that's fine.
I'd build a Narinje for definite, and I think I would take one of the. I would take. I don't know. It's tough. Yeah, the Papas Karasi or the Kelasek Karasi. I think they're both very good. They're both nice. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.